Have you been noticing empty store shelves, prices for food and other items going through the roof? Have you noticed the headlines? Food shortages could be just as deadly as global pandemic. Disaster in the heartland. Wheat crops in Kansas are failing on a massive scale. Off-the-charts chemical shortages hit U.S. farms. Overlapping crises push millions into extreme levels of acute food insecurity. And then, of course, the effects of the Ukraine war on the global food supply. So, my friends, to whatever extent this actually hits home for you, know that the Ultimate Herbal Database does have your back. You will need a computer, that's the only thing. Now, many years ago, I acquired a book, a fabulous book, called How to Survive a Famine, and knowing that it was out of print, I transcribed the whole thing into the database. So through this series, I'm going to show you some of that and help you get some confidence that if this turns out to be really dire for you, you can make it. You can get through this. So let's start by taking a look at this section of the database called Starvation and Famine. As usual, we've got videos and articles. I'm just going to scroll down and read a little bit of this to you. Of course, we see here that famines are common and have occurred in every part of the world. Now, here in the United States, partly due to our normalcy bias, we really don't expect to see that, but you never know. They're deadly and they have long-term consequences. The Irish potato famine, for example, 1/3 of the population died. Another third migrated to other countries. Now, they're not the only type of food shortage. There are others, including hunger seasons and small-scale famines. So there are many famine foods. These are not particularly enjoyable. They're just eaten to stay alive. You can find them in the database by the color code tag wild foods, and we're going to go through some of that. Some of these foods are, of course, very desirable in and of themselves, so they wouldn't be tagged as famine foods as such. One of the major factors in collapse of food crop production is that the plant varieties used for mass food production aren't set up to deal with drought conditions. We'll get into that in more detail in another video. Without any food, humans usually die in about 1 to 2 months. Lean people can usually survive with a loss of up to 18% of their body mass, and of course, obese people can tolerate more, maybe over 20%. Females survive longer than males. What are the signs and symptoms of starvation? Well, in the beginning, the impact is largely on mental status and behaviors. Symptoms show up as irritable mood, fatigue, trouble concentrating, and of course, preoccupation with food thoughts. People with those symptoms tend to be easily distracted and have no energy. As starvation progresses, the physical symptoms set in, and the timing depends on age, size, and overall health. It usually takes days to weeks and includes weakness, fast heart rate, shallow breaths that are slowed, thirst, and constipation. And of course, there could be diarrhea in some cases. The eyes begin to sink in and glass over. Muscles begin to become smaller. Muscle wasting sets in. One prominent sign in children is a swollen belly. I'm sure all of you have seen those photos. Loose skin, and the skin turns pale in color. There could be swelling of the feet and ankles. It does also affect the immune system. The immune system is weakened, so there's slow wound healing and poor response to infection. There could be rashes on the skin. The body's directing any nutrients available to keep organs functioning. We wouldn't even exist if our ancestors hadn't eaten famine foods at some point. This I found interesting. During the Dutch hunger season of 1944, one of the primary famine foods was tulip bulbs. It's important to remember that we need calories. The calories needed are your weight times 12 for the base amounts of calories you need to remain static, that is, not working, in order to keep your current weight. This doesn't factor in required foods such as fats, starches, or even water. By the way, too much protein forces your body to burn calories faster. Some broad categories of the types of plant foods that have been eaten in famines include increased or atypical use of plants. For example, corn cobs were ground up and added to grains and other foods. That was really just for filler. Bean and squash leaves and rinds are important famine foods. Seed stock has been eaten, so has animal feed, agricultural refuse and byproducts, the native plants known to be edible or barely edible, and native plants that are unknown or mimic other plants, and then tabooed foods. Scrolling down through some of these articles, here under a table laden with famine foods, there's an excerpt that kale and clay is what starving people sometimes eat. They don't eat just any clay. When a human is really hungry, the body develops new kinds of instincts. In accounts of besieged Leningrad, I read that people began to sniff food that had no smell, like raw buckwheat. A similar thing happens with clay. The hungry can instinctively tell which clay can be eaten. And then here's an article from Chinese Tales from the Archives, A Plant for the End of the World. This is an ancient text. I'm not going to read all of it. You can come to the database. But one of the things that was said was that there is none equal to the power of attractoloides. It's here where the author reveals that attractoloides, among all others, can dispel the ghost-borne diseases at the millennial climax. The plant among plants is the key to survival in the end times. If you're curious about the plant she's referring to, attractoloides, you can just use the search box and let's type it in. And there's the genus. And here we've got 3 versions of attractoloides. The white attractoloides rhizome may be what she's referring to. Here you can read the scientific research. And here, this color is the color for Chinese formulas. There is a capsule called Shensu, which is from the white attractoloides. Now to go back, I'll show you an easy way to go back because we do have a breadcrumb trail. I'm going to click back on starvation and show you some more of the useful information. Clicking that little pointy arrow to open up this information panel and then open it up again. And now we see the whole, there's an internal browser inside the database. And I want to go to the very end here and click on the hunger map. This is kept updated. We see the total number of people with insufficient food, 17 countries with very high levels of hunger. And down here at the bottom, if we click on rainfall, we can see there is a global drought problem. I'm going to cover that more in another video because something happens to plants during drought that are normally healthy for us. They can become quite toxic, and that's important to know. If we go to vegetation, check out the green areas. That is where there is above average vegetation. Below average is everything in the brown color. The black is just normal. So that gives you an idea of what's happening with our crops. And of course, you can click on conflict or undernourishment. Let's click on that one real quick and see what it's showing. It looks a lot like what we would expect. A lot of hunger in Africa, India, Mexico, parts of South America. Now, if you ask parents who are looking for infant formula if the food situation is okay here in the United States, I think Australia may be having the same problem. They'll say, hey, there's a hunger problem here. This is according to the World Food Program, where there are serious problems or emerging problems with our food supply. Some other tabs in this section include the World Food Situation from the United Nations, and we've got a fairly recent video about the food crisis and some suggestions for protecting ourselves. Here is a list of food plants and food that has been destroyed in the past year, a video. Here is a video from Dr. Campbell I'll just play a few moments of what he has to say.
Well, you're most welcome to today's talk, Friday, the 3rd of June. Now, the biggest health threat coming up in the next few months globally, or certainly one of the biggest health threats coming up globally, is going to be famine. There's going to be outright starvation, I'm afraid, in many parts of the world, and we'll be looking at some of the reasons for this.
Well, I'm also looking into the reasons for it and keeping track of all of the news and information that's coming out in this section, 2022 news. The latest article here is measuring the war's effect on the global breadbasket. Scrolling down, a few other things to take note of is the diesel problem. The prices are having a big impact on trucking. Got a shortage of truckers now. They can't get diesel or they can't afford it. So food isn't getting to the market. But beyond that, we see that in Pennsylvania and other places, farms are being crushed by the diesel prices. They use diesel for their farm machinery and they just can't afford it. So that's an impact. If we scroll down, another factor is food facility fires have been going on fairly regularly between 2020 and 2022. Aside from the fires, these plants, the food processing plants in the United States, have been damaged or destroyed in a variety of ways, mostly fire. But here is a list going up through April of this year, and I'm adding more as I come across them. But we have a map that's keeping track of all of that right here on this tab in the browser. Let me click on that. This map includes grocery stores that have been destroyed. Now we're back at the main heading, Starvation and Famine. By the way, in the database, this is a visual database, and you see here everything that's directly connected to the topic, which is always in the middle, is directly connected. There's relevant information, so explore those areas. And to quickly find this, I have pinned it at the top under More. Topics that are timely are pinned here, and you see some of them. The quick access is right there. So I just wanted to point out a couple of other things I think you'll be interested in before we finish up. Scrolling down, there are some studies down here. Let's see, where are they? Okay, you see carnosic acid, that's the color for the compounds that are in plants. And this study showed that carnosic acid protected against starvation-induced cell death. That's found in rosemary and sage. And beneath that, another study showed that ginsenoside, RIG1, which is found in Asian ginseng, protected muscles from having protein degradation during starvation. Anyway, I'm going to finish up now. I'm coming back with another video very soon to share with you some of the issues that have been discovered with the impacts of high heat and drought on plants that are normally quite healthy for us. So thanks for joining me. Please share this video and subscribe. Stay tuned. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.